You probably ate cereal this morning. Or toast. But what if I told you that everything you know about breakfast is a complete lie? For almost all of human history, that scheduled morning meal just didn't exist. The first meal of the day for our ancestors was an insane gamble. Sometimes it was cold, leftover mammoth. Sometimes a handful of bugs. And pretty often it was literally nothing. We've all been sold this crazy story about cavemen eating a giant slab of meat before a big hunt. It's the entire paleo diet marketing machine. But that picture is completely fake. If you could go back to the Stone Age and ask, "What's for breakfast?" they wouldn't even understand the question. So, what did hunter-gatherers actually eat in the morning? The real answer is stranger, tougher, and way more opportunistic than you could ever imagine. To understand their first meal, you have to picture their first moments. For a hunter-gatherer, sunrise wasn't about comfort. It was cold. The fire was probably just embers. And the number one feeling for every single person? Insane hunger. There was no pantry, no fridge, no food waiting. There was only what the world gave them, and the world doesn't care about your schedule. Their first job wasn't eating, it was work. The day's labor began immediately. Men might group up for a high-risk hunt that usually failed. Women, children, and sometimes men would go forage for the reliable food that was the true backbone of their diet. That whole men hunt, women gather idea. Modern research shows it was way more flexible, with women in many groups being active hunters. They ate when food was found. There was no breakfast time. Thousands of years later, even the Romans thought eating in the morning was gluttonous. But for our ancestors, it was simple. You eat when you can, because you have no idea when you'll eat next. Their mornings were about finding an opportunity and seizing it, not sitting down for a meal. Okay, but what if they got super lucky? Imagine the hunters came back yesterday with a huge red deer. The whole camp would have had an epic feast, a rare celebration of fat and protein. On a morning like this, our ancestors woke up to the ultimate luxury: leftovers. But this isn't a neatly wrapped sandwich. It's cold, hard meat ripped off the bone. And more importantly, they ate the parts we throw in the trash. The single most valuable food wasn't muscle meat, it was fat. Eating only lean protein can cause a deadly condition called rabbit starvation. So fat from organs and bone marrow was the high-energy fuel they desperately needed. A morning that started with cracking open a femur to scoop out the marrow inside? That was an insanely good morning. This was the Stone Age power bar, a massive blast of calories for the day's work. We have proof from Otzi the Iceman, a perfectly preserved 5,300-year-old mummy. His last meal was incredibly high in fat, with meat and fatty tissue from both ibex and red deer. But a meal like this was the exception. On the many, many mornings the hunters failed, the camp ate the food that was always there, waiting in the dirt. Here's the real truth. For most ancient people, on most mornings, the first meal came from gathering, not hunting. Meat was an amazing prize, but plants were reliable. A hunter-gatherer's entire life was built on a god-tier knowledge of their environment. In warm months, breakfast might be a quick handful of wild berries. But the real treasure was underground, roots and tubers. These were the Stone Age version of bread and potatoes. They were often tough and bitter raw, but fire transformed them. A root buried in the hot ashes from last night's fire could be pulled out in the morning, becoming a soft, warm, and filling meal. And the evidence for this is overwhelming. In a cave in Mozambique, archaeologists found starch grains from wild sorghum on 105,000-year-old stone tools. In Italy, a 32,000-year-old grinding stone has traces of processed oat. People were making something like porridge or flatbread thousands of years before farming was even invented. This was the real daily bread of our ancestors, found with a digging stick, not a spear. Beyond roots and the luxury of meat, there was another food source, one that's packed with protein but will probably make your stomach turn. I'm talking about insects. For us, eating grubs or ants is disgusting, but for a hunter-gatherer, this was just a high-quality, easy meal. This wasn't a desperate act of starvation, it was a smart, normal part of their diet. Grubs, termites, even swarms of locusts, all of these were free calories and protein. They could be eaten on the go, a quick, crunchy snack while looking for other food. No ceremony needed. Unlike a huge animal, insects were everywhere. They were a low-risk, high-reward food that gave them an essential protein boost. A hunt could fail. Berries could have a bad season. But there were almost always bugs. It was one of the most efficient ways to get a morning meal. There was one more treasure, maybe the most calorie-dense food a hunter-gatherer could ever find. A substance so powerful, so desired, that people have risked their lives for it since the beginning of our species. Honey. Before sugar, honey was pure energy. Finding a wild beehive was like winning the lottery, but getting to it was an insane challenge. It meant climbing dangerous cliffs or massive trees, all while being attacked by thousands of angry bees. Famous rock art from Spain and Africa shows these daring honey hunters, proving how important this was. For modern hunter-gatherers like the Hadza in Tanzania, honey isn't a treat, it's a critical food. In some seasons, it can make up a huge part of their calories, and this wasn't the clean honey we buy. They ate it straight from the comb, wax, bee larvae, and all. That mix of pure sugar from honey and the fat, and protein from the larvae made it a literal superfood. That mouthful of sweetness was the closest the Stone Age had to a breakfast worth dying for. This entire picture isn't just a guess. It's built from hard, physical, and sometimes microscopic evidence. So how do we actually know all this? See, one of the most incredible sources is locked inside their fossilized teeth. If you don't brush your teeth, plaque hardens into a crust called dental calculus. This calculus is a time capsule, trapping microscopic particles of everything a person ate. Scientists can analyze this ancient tartar and find starch from plants, muscle fibers from meat, and even DNA from the exact species they ate. For example, calculus from Neanderthals in Belgium showed they ate rhino and sheep, while others in Spain ate pine nuts, moss, and mushrooms. Another huge clue is in their bones. Chemical analysis can tell us if a diet was mostly plants, meat, or a mix. And finally, we have perfectly preserved stomach contents. Ötzi the Iceman's stomach gave us a perfect snapshot of his last meal. Ibex and red deer meat, tons of fat, and grains like einkorn. We can even analyze fossilized poop or coprolites to see exactly what was on the menu thousands of years ago. So if our ancestors ate like this for hundreds of thousands of years, where did our idea of breakfast come from? It all comes down to two massive revolutions. First was the agricultural revolution, around 12,000 years ago. For the first time in history, people had a surplus of food they could store, mostly grains. You didn't have to go out and find food first thing in the morning. You could make porridge from the grain you already had. This is where the first idea of a routine morning meal starts. But the real game changer was the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. For the first time, millions of people were not in control of their own schedules. They had to leave home for brutal, long shifts in factories. It became absolutely necessary to eat a huge meal before leaving for work, just to survive the day. Breakfast was now a requirement. And then, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a guy named John Harvey Kellogg started brilliantly marketing foods like cornflakes as essential, healthy morning meals. Breakfast was no longer just a routine. It was a massive industry. That famous phrase, the most important meal of the day, didn't come from science. It was a marketing campaign for cereal. The modern breakfast was born, invented, packaged, and sold to us. Learning about our own history is insane, and it can totally change how you see your own life. If you love digging into the real science of our past, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell so you don't miss our next video. And I am genuinely curious. After hearing this, what would your go-to Stone Age breakfast be? Let me know in the comments below. So, the ancient morning menu was a wild, shifting feast of whatever the world gave them. It was cold leftover meat and rich marrow on the super lucky days. It was roasted roots and berries on the normal days. And it was crazier treasures too, crunchy insects and dripping golden honey. What connects all of this isn't a recipe, it's an attitude. Survival. Our ancestors ate what was real, what was whole, and what the land around them provided. They did process foods, but nothing was refined or packaged like it is today. And here's the biggest irony. Our modern bodies, which evolved in that world of insane scarcity, are now drowning in a world of unlimited food. Those exact same cravings for fat and sugar that pushed us to crack bones and climb cliffs for honey are still inside us. But now they pull us toward the processed junk food in our supermarkets. Understanding the hunter-gatherer morning doesn't just teach us about the past, it tells us about ourselves. It's a reminder that underneath all our routines, our bodies are still wired for a wilder world, a world where the first meal of the day wasn't a habit, but an ultimate hard-won prize.